Part 98. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 971. Chapter 971. As the saying goes, an appearance can make 1,000 miles. Wu Qiuzao heard that the princess of Heshuo County was coming, and he hurriedly went to Fan Qinjiao's yard to bring his son back, but he was worried that something would happen. Thinking that Cao Lishan was quite good at coaxing her, Wu Qiuzao looked at Cao Lishan and said, "Go to my sister-in-law's yard with me. I heard that the crown prince Jing Chuan is also here. I'm afraid that the young crown prince will refuse to follow me." Cao Lishan quickly waved her hands and said, "I don't dare to talk to the crown prince in my status." Wu Qiuzao said with a smile, "I see that King Xin has been very close to you recently. Children are all intelligent. How you treat King Xin is how you treat Prince Jing Chuan." A trace of panic flashed in Cao Lishan's eyes. She took Wu Qiuzao's hand and asked, "I just saw that King Xin was somewhat attached to her. Did my cousin-in-law also tell the princess about this? My sister-in-law is so busy recently, I won't talk too much. Besides, you and my sister-in-law are also cousins. Since you really want to fall in love with me, are you afraid of what my sister-in-law will do?" Wu Qiuzao looked at Cao Lishan curiously, always feeling that she was a little too nervous. Cao Lishan said quickly, "The crown princess has never liked me, and she has always treated me differently from the sisters in the house. My mother often said that an appearance can make a difference. I dare not blame the crown princess. I just want to play more with King Xin, that's enough." Wu Qiuzao could actually detect that her sister-in-law seemed to be deliberately keeping a distance from Cao Lishan. Although she didn't know the reason, she believed that her sister-in-law always had her own reasons. However, during the time she spent with Cao Lishan, Wu Qiuzao also felt that Cao Lishan is really good, but his temper is a bit cowardly. After thinking about it, Wu Qiuzao smiled and said, "Don't worry, I won't say anything." When Cao Lishan saw this, she quickly thanked her, as if Fan Qinjiao had done something heinous to her. Wu Qiuzao also felt that something was inappropriate. He led Cao Lishan to Fan Qinjiao's yard and whispered, "Actually, my sister-in-law is the easiest person I have ever gotten along with. Although she seems to be keeping strangers away, my character and personality are excellent. If I hadn't been my sister-in-law, how would I have been related to the Hua family?" Wu Qiuzao thought that as long as she told Cao Lishan what happened to her, Cao Lishan would also change her view of Fan Qinjiao. But Cao Lishan didn't think so when she heard it. No wonder Sister Swining would say that the crown princess is the most selfish person. She didn't expect that even her brother's marriage would be so involved. She said she wanted her brother and sister-in-law to get married, but in reality, Wu Qiuzao was far more powerful than Wu Qiuzao. That unmarried woman is easy to manipulate. No wonder the Hua family now circles around Fan Qinjiao. It turns out that Fan Qinjiao carefully attracted and designed him. However, Cao Lishan thought so in her heart, but did not dare to show it on her face. As soon as she entered the courtyard, she watched Wu Qiuzao go deeper, while she waited obediently at the door until Wu Qiuzao took Brother Ren with him. He walked back with Crown Prince Jing Chuan, and then followed him out of the courtyard again. In the courtyard, Princess Heshuo County saw that she was finally taken away, and the smile on her face gradually faded. Fan Qinjiao had actually seen his adoptive mother's forced smile a long time ago, but the children were inconvenient to ask. Now seeing this, he quickly took his adoptive mother's wrist and pressed it. The Kun pulse is off string, the Pun pulse is stringy and hyper, and the left Guan pulse is slippery. This is a symptom of qi stagnation in the middle jiao accompanied by qi stagnation caused by body fluid and dryness. My adoptive mother has had a hard time falling asleep recently, wakes up easily, and is a little upset, Fan Qinjiao asked. The princess of Heshuo County sighed and said, "It's not because of that incident. Ever since we knew we were coming to this palace, your adoptive father and I haven't even had a good night's sleep. It would be okay if you didn't know the Emperor's intentions, but now the Emperor's thoughts are right in front of you. Who doesn't worry that his children will become the slaves of others? The most helpless thing is that even if you know it, you can only follow it and you can't escape at all. Fan Kinjao stood up and walked around behind his adoptive mother, raised his hands and slowly massaged several acupuncture points on his head. His voice was equally deep, since some things are already in front of us, we can only face them head on. If today keep silent, it will eventually be your turn. How could Heshuo County princess not understand this truth? I just hope God has the vision to make things go smoothly this time, otherwise, Ziliang is just afraid, there will be no more Ziliang. Fan Kinjao's rubbing hand paused for a moment, and then he started pressing it methodically again. Yes. God has always made a clear distinction between grudges and grudges. Otherwise she wouldn't be standing here. At this time, a group of young women passed by the courtyard. It turns out you got it too, I thought I had it myself. How come? I heard that anyone who is destined can get it this time. No wonder, I just saw a lot of ladies trying their luck. The chirping young woman's voice was as clear as an aureole. Although it seemed a little noisy, it still dispersed the gloomy atmosphere in the yard. The princess of Heshuo County took Fan Kinjao's hand and said with a smile, "Look at how energetic the little girls are outside. I heard that because they can take care of their families this time, many new faces have been brought to various mansions. They are all the younger generation who couldn't lead the family in the past are now showing their talents." Fan Kinjao also smiled and said, "The people in this main city are like flowers blooming on the branches, one after another." The princess of Heshuo County looked at the calm smile on Fan Kinjao's face and felt guilty. Before coming, the princess of Heshuo County also told her not to say anything to little Kinjao. This child is actually under greater pressure than anyone else. Who knew she couldn't hold it back for a moment? With these thoughts in mind, the princess of Heshuo County simply stood up. Seeing that the weather was good today and there were no small things tied around her, she simply took Fan Kinjao out of the yard to get some fresh air. Fan Kinjao didn't understand why his adoptive mother felt guilty. Although she didn't really want to go out, she didn't refuse. This palace is built on the top of a mountain, with pleasant scenery and clear air. Walking on the winding path of the palace, you can see blooming flowers everywhere. As Fan Kinjao and the princess of Heshuo County were walking, they saw 4 or 5 young girls walking towards them. They looked like they would be getting married in a year or two. If I count carefully, I'm not a few years younger than you. You are just like Qing Chuan. You are both young and mature. It's my fault that you keep talking about things that are available and not available, Princess Heshuo County said guiltily. Fan Kinjao smiled faintly. What my foster mother said is exactly what I think in my heart. There is no need to feel guilty. There is never a stable life in this world, it's just a calculation. The princess of Heshuo County felt even more guilty after hearing this. She didn't know what Xiao Kinjao had grown up eating. He was obviously the same age as Hua, but thinking about those things all day long was so heavy that it gave people a headache. As they were talking here, they saw several little daughters walking up to them. Given the seniority of Fan Kinjao and the princess of Heshuo County, no matter what the status of the youngest daughter's family is, even if they are juniors from the queen's family or the noble concubine's family, they will have to pay their respects to their luggage. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 972. Chapter 972, that is the Crown Princess. So Fan Kinjao has no intention of giving in, and Princess Heshuo County will naturally not take the initiative to give way. I just didn't expect that the little girls were just laughing and playing, and didn't even notice the people in front of them. When they reacted, one of them had already bumped into the shoulder of Princess Heshuo County. Ouch, the little girl cried out in pain and fell to the ground, which attracted the attention of others. The little girls looked at them for a long time, but no one recognized Fan Kinjao and Princess Heshuo. After all, neither Fan Kinjao nor the Princess of Heshuo County are good at walking around. When they are in the main city, they are unwilling to show up casually. Now that they have arrived at the palace, they have just walked around today. Fan Kinjao didn't have time to pay attention to his little daughter sitting on the ground. He checked his adoptive mother's shoulder first and was relieved when he saw that there was only a slight bump. The little daughter who fell on the ground waited for a long time but didn't see Fan Kinjao or Princess Heshuo making any intention to speak. Then she looked at the other little daughters around her, all of them snickering, and immediately felt embarrassed. Red. After looking at the age and clothing of Fan Kinjao and the Princess of Heshuo County, he just thought that they were some unscrupulous low-class mansion who came to have a relationship, and he opened his mouth and said, "You are the mother and daughter of a small family, and you bumped into each other. Why don't you name yourself and apologize?" The Princess of Heshuo County frowned. "How can you be sure that we must have come from a small family?" The youngest daughter also had a suspicious look on her face after hearing this, but then she looked at Fan Kinjao's waist and sneered, "There isn't even the sachet given by the third prince. It's not Xiaomeng Xiao. What is a household?" The other little daughters also smiled disdainfully when they heard this. They have never seen the princes and concubines living in this palace, but since they are married, they all need to have their hair tied up. How can they be like Fan Kinjao with half of his hair loose behind his back? Moreover, when they came this time, the princes and concubines all lived in a deeper courtyard. I heard that the prince and concubine were arranged next to the queen's palace. They could see them wherever they said they could. Woolen cloth. "Why don't you apologize quickly?" the younger daughter urged with eyes wide open. Fan Kinjao supported his adoptive mother and asked calmly, "I wonder what family this girl comes from. If her status is really comparable to ours, we will definitely apologize. My cousin is the left minister of the Ministry of Etiquette." The younger daughter raised her chin with pride on her face. Hearing this, Princess Heshuo County looked at Fan Kinjao. "Ministry of Rights? Zhou Chun's man? What are you doing? My uncle's identity can be vouched for by everyone present," the youngest daughter shouted. "Coming to the palace this time is no different than before. There are many cousins coming from different branches, and they are all from the younger generation. Since these people are lucky enough to be here, they are all rushing to make friends and compare with each other. Now that I see my little daughter saying this, there are many people who want to curry favor with her. They all took the initiative to help and testify. Are you too scared to move? We are not unreasonable. As long as you sincerely apologize to us, the matter will be over. I don't know which mother and daughter came from a small family, but they were so bold that they dared to offend relatives of the left minister of the Ministry of Rights. The niece of the left minister of the Ministry of Etiquette has never been so praised by the stars. Now many people are helping her to speak, and they even said coldly to Fan Kinjao, 'Who gave you the courage, after knowing my identity and still not apologizing, do you still want to say that you don't know my cousin?' Fan Kinjao thought carefully, 'I really don't know your cousin, but your cousin should know me.' At this moment, I saw several more women walking from a distance. Compared to the group of little girls standing here, the women who came behind were obviously older. The niece of the left minister of the Ministry of Etiquette looked at Fan Kinjao, looking like you have something else to say this time. Then she walked to one of the women and said, 'Cousin, you came just in time. There is someone here who said he knows you.' The daughter of the left minister of the Ministry of Rights is not very close to this cousin, but after hearing this, she still said, 'There are many people coming to the palace this time, and I am not surprised if some of them know her. That man bumped into me but didn't admit his fault. In my opinion, he just wanted to have a relationship. How could such a thing happen?' When the daughter of the left minister of the Ministry of Rights heard what he said, she came over curiously. She was just trying to see who was so bold and dared to have a blind relationship in the palace. She didn't expect that her legs would go weak after just one glance. Plop! He knelt down on the ground with a cry. The niece of the left minister of the Ministry of Rights saw this and quickly came to help her. Cousin, what's wrong with you? The daughter of the left minister of the Ministry of Rights pushed him away and knelt on the ground, curled up like a quail, not even daring to raise her head. When the other daughters from afar saw this, they also came over curiously. When they saw Princess Heshuo and Fan Kinjao clearly, their faces turned pale and they knelt on the ground. Nearly 10 ladies from the city were kneeling on the ground, shaking like chaff, unable to speak a single word. This scene was really spectacular. The other little daughters looked surprised when they saw this. Seeing this, the princess of Heshuo County breathed a sigh of relief. Finally, I met a few people who can talk to each other. Otherwise, if she were to reveal her identity to a group of little girls, it would inevitably sound like bullying. Fan Kinjao didn't want to make the matter too big. Now that she had more important things to do, the lower profile the better. She looked at the daughter of the left minister of the Ministry of Rights and said, I remember your name is Lu Baiwei, right? Lu Baiwei hurriedly lowered her head and said, it's my little girl. Fan Kinjao remembered that this lover Baiwei had a good relationship with Zhao Jianjia. He was also among the candidates when the princess was selected, but she was not selected subsequently, so she didn't pay much attention to it. Just as he was about to look away, he happened to see a similar sachet on Lu Baiwei's waist. Fan Kinjao asked curiously, is anyone selling sachets in the palace? Lu Baiwei said truthfully, yes, the third prince is approachable. Anyone who goes to visit the third prince today and has a close relationship with the third prince will be given this sachet. I heard that it is from King Nanzai. New product, just right for this season, it can repel mosquitoes and refresh your mind. Hearing this, Princess Heshuo County looked at Fan Kinjao. Fan Kinjao. Princess Heshuo didn't want to make the matter a big deal at first. She waved her hand and said, okay, let's all disperse. It's just that there are people of all statuses in this palace, so you should keep a low profile in the future. Yoluo, take Fan Kinjao and leave first. Who are you, cousin, to scare you like this? The niece of the left minister of the Ministry of Rights muttered in a low voice. Lu Baiwei glared at her ignorant cousin. I told you not to be so arrogant, but you just didn't listen. That's the current princess of Heshuo County. If we really pursue the case, I won't be able to protect you. The niece of the Zhoushilang of the Ministry of Rights was stunned. Then, that young woman is the princess. These words made other women from official families laugh. Lu Baiwei almost gritted her teeth and said, that is the current crown princess. The niece of the left minister of the Ministry of Rights felt her eyes go dark and almost fainted on the spot. The little daughters who had just helped out turned pale with fright. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 973. Chapter 973 Attacking the Little Princess. The princess of Heshuo County turned into a side road with Fan Kinjao, and when she saw that there was no one else around, she said, I heard that the third princess who just entered the palace is very domineering, but I didn't expect that she was not a little bit. I don't even have the brains to think of using this trip to the palace to build relationships. The third prince's concubine has just arrived. She uses the title of meeting new people and giving small gifts to win people's hearts. No one can say anything. Moreover, she also needs to show her identity as the Guan family. Naturally, people who come to seek protection are flocking to her. Although the gifts chosen by the three princes and concubines this time are all distant relatives of officials in the DPRK and China, No one can predict whether these distant relatives will be married in the main city in the future. The relationship in the main city is originally a paper plate, and in the end, all gradually developing into a party of 3 princes is also a matter of course. If the third princess had such a head, she wouldn't have done such a stupid thing yesterday, Fan Kinjao said softly. The princess of Heshuo County was stunned. What? Fan Kinjao told her yesterday about Guanpaner's plan to get people around her. The princess of Heshuo County did not expect such a thing to happen. She thought for a while and said, "It seems that someone is playing a clever trick on the third prince's concubine behind the scenes. As long as he can win over people's hearts, he will not only benefit himself, but also gain favor from the third prince. Now that I can think about Guanpaner, so, even if the mother-in-law does not explain Fan Kinjao, she knows. It's just a conversation between smart people, and there is never a need to say everything." Fan Kinjao thought for a while and said, "No matter who came up with this idea for the third prince, since he used something from King Nanzai, she deserves it. It can't be done." Hearing these words, Princess Heshuo knew that Fan Kinjao had already made plans in his mind, so she didn't say anything more. The two of them strolled around for a while, then went back to lead Prince Jingchuan away. After Fan Kinjao saw off her adoptive mother, she returned to the house and wrote a letter. However, she came to the palace in a hurry this time, so she did not bring Ta Shui with her. After she wrote the letter, she put it in her sleeve. Inside, wait for Bailey Fengming to come later, and then entrust Bailey Fengming to it. However, as the sky gradually darkened, Bailey Fengming's figure did not arrive. Instead, a palace servant hurriedly ran over and said, Princess Chi, Princess Pinglay has invited me. It is said that the little princess has a high fever." As soon as Fan Kinjao heard that the little princess was ill, he quickly picked up his medicine box, found the person who had sent the message, and went directly to the courtyard where King Pinglay temporarily lived. As soon as he entered the courtyard, King Pinglay pushed a wooden cart to welcome him. "The crown princess is here to help." Fan Kinjao looked at King Pinglay and saw that he only looked anxious, but not gloomy. He thought the little princess must have just developed symptoms. Where is the little princess? King Pinglay quickly called the nanny of the young princess over and personally led Fan Kinjao to the backyard. "When did the little princess have symptoms?" Reply to the crown princess, "Half an hour ago." "In addition to fever, are there any other symptoms?" "The little princess didn't nurse at noon today." The servant thought that the little princess was a bit acquainted when she first arrived, so she stayed with her and didn't dare to neglect. Then she realized that something was wrong with the little princess. Fan Kinjao walked all the way and inquired about the little princess. He thought that if he didn't nurse at noon, he would have been slightly unwell in the morning. It's just that the wet nurse didn't know medical skills and was not alert after all. Following the nanny to lead the way, Fan Kinjao carried the medicine box directly into the house. There were a group of palace maids guarding the room. When they saw the crown princess entering, they all knelt on the ground to say hello. It was Yan Hanbei who was guarding the little princess's bed when he heard the sound and walked out quickly. Fan Kinjao didn't wait for her to speak, but took her hand and told her that there was no need to panic. Yan Hanbo nodded with all his strength and led Fan Kinjao around the screen into the back room. On the bed, the little princess was so burned that she couldn't cry anymore. The little person was huddled in the swaddling clothes, gasping for air with only a small mouth. Just looking at it made people feel sad. Fan Kinjao bent his knees and squatted beside the bed. He first checked the little princess's pulse with his hands, and then used his index and middle fingers to press together on various parts of the little princess's abdominal cavity. Just when the person was called, the little princess suddenly burst into tears at the top of her lungs. "What's going on?" Yan Hanbei was so frightened that he grabbed Fan Kinjao's sleeve, his voice trembling as he asked. Fan Kinjao opened the medicine box, and while mixing the medicinal materials for the little princess, he said softly, "It's just a little bit of typhoid fever. I didn't take it to heart yesterday, but it's a bit on my mind today. This is how children are, and the disease comes and goes quickly. Quick, let everyone get out and let the air out of the room. Looking at Fan Kinjao's frown, Yan Hanbei felt that things were not as simple as they said, but she still sent everyone away personally. By chance, King Pinglai arrived at this time. He followed Yan Hanbei back to the back room. He looked at Fan Kinjao and asked, "There are only 3 of us in this room now. The crown princess won't say anything directly." Fan Kinjao's voice was lowered at this time. "Someone drugged the little princess." "You, what did you say?" Yan Hanbei staggered and almost fell down. King Pinglai hugged her and said in surprise, "Someone in the palace actually wants to kill my daughter. It was drugged, but it was not poison. It was just some drugs that stimulated the child's senses. Children are inherently more sensitive than ordinary people. With the stimulation of drugs, the body will naturally produce some stress reactions." Fan Qing, as Yao said, he had already prepared a medicine. Because the illness of the little princess came unexpectedly, there was no need to put in the effort to make it decoction. Fan Kinjao directly mixed the water with it and lightly applied it on the little princess's vagina. Soon the little princess calmed down. King Pinglai stepped forward and touched his daughter's forehead, and sure enough he saw signs of fever subsided. Could it be that brother 3 emperors did it? For such a frenzied attack on an unexperienced child, King Pinglai could only think of Bailey wrongs. Yan Hanbei's face changed greatly. "Did the 3rd prince choose our daughter?" Fan Kinjao saw that Yan Hanbei was really moving around when he was stimulated, so he quickly pulled her to sit on a chair nearby, poured a cup of tea and handed it to her, saying, "You don't need to be so excited now. Someone is treating the little princess. Take action, but it may not really be the order of the 3rd prince." According to the information Bailey Fengming received, Bailey Rongs had not shown up in the construction and deployment of Xindao Temple. In other words, other than Bailey Rongs, there were other people involved. Just like Princess Yunyu's master, Tang Juwei. Just like the disappearance of so many people in the 2 cities, it may not all be due to Bailey Rongs' orders and arrangements. If Bailey Rongs can really hide it so deeply, after the frame-up on the 15th, the 5th prince would not discover the flaw. If it's not the 3rd prince, who else can it be? Yan Hanbei pulled Fan Kinjao and asked. Fan Kinjao shook his head. Now those people are in the dark, but they are in the light. This is the most difficult part. It is precisely because of this that she chooses to sit back and wait, so as not to alert the enemy and leave any trouble in the future. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 974. Chapter 974 is also a blessing in disguise. But don't worry, since the little princess has been drugged, the possibility of being taken away is not high. Fan Kinjao patted Yan Hanbei on the shoulder, hoping that she would wake up a little. Yan Hanbei was stunned. "What do you mean?" King Pinglai reacted quickly. "What the crown princess means is that since those people want to kidnap the child, the last thing they want is to be discovered, so if they really try to kidnap the child, they will take the child away directly. If this is a wake-up call for us, will we not take the child away again?" Fan Kinjao nodded. "That's what I mean." But why did those people do this? Yan Hanbei didn't understand. Since those people had successfully attacked his daughter, why didn't they just take her away instead of drugging her? "Perhaps you want to see how alert we are," Fan Kinjao said. Since Bailey Rongs used Zhao Yi as a test at the beginning, no matter how fast the queen dealt with it, as long as Bailey Rongs didn't see Zhao Yi, he would definitely become suspicious. Otherwise, the emperor would not suddenly come to a palace to celebrate the festival. I'm afraid that the other side has the same anxiety as us now. They know each other's existence, but they are not sure how much the other side knows and how they want to deal with it. So testing it out in advance is also a good idea, Fan Kinjao said softly. However, Bailey Rongs has always maintained his aloofness. Although he is not arrogant, as long as it is something he wants to plan, he will never bother to test it in advance, because in his opinion, there is no one smarter than him in the world. People. So Fan Kinjao thought that this temptation might not necessarily be caused by Bailey Rongs. Such caution is more in line with Tang Juwei's style. Yan Hanbei naturally believed in Fan Kinjao and knew that she would never lie to her. Thinking that his daughter's fever had gone away, he gradually calmed down. Seeing that the princess was really calm, King Pinglai said again, "In this case, we'd better not make any announcement about this matter. It's common for children to get sick anyway, so I will announce to the outside that it happened last night, caught a cold." Fan Kinjao did not expect that King Pinglai would be the calmest one when encountering big events. He is worthy of being the eldest brother among all the princes. Such a mature mind requires the accumulation of age and experience. No wonder Bailey Rongs chose to win over King Pinglai. It is indeed not unreasonable. I will prescribe a prescription for the little princess in a moment. I still need to trouble the prince to send it to the Taiyuan hospital in the palace and have someone prepare the medicine according to the prescription. After the medicine is delivered, I will carefully have it cooked 3 times a day. Just pour it out and repeat this for 2 to 3 days. Fan Kinjao looked at King Pinglai and warned. King Pinglai nodded, "The crown princess is here for you." Yan Hanbei took Fan Kinjao's hand, "Then my daughter." Fan Kinjao smiled and said, "The cold this time is caused by the servants' carelessness. Since the servants are not doing things well, it is normal for a mother to take her daughter by her side and serve her carefully. When I get back, I will send this. Here are the maids from my courtyard, don't worry, they all used to serve the queen and are very clean." Yan Hanbei nodded quickly with tears in his eyes. No words could express the gratitude in his heart. Fan Kinjao calculated that Bailey Fengming should also send King Xin back at this time. After writing the prescription for the little princess, he stood up and left. At the same time that Fan Kinjao left King Pinglai's side, Bailey Rongs just stepped into the courtyard with King Xin in his arms. Wu Qiuzao had just fallen asleep and was about to get up when he heard some movement. Cao Lishan took the initiative and said, "The shadow I just saw through the window is that of the princess. I just go and have a look. My cousin-in-law, please don't bother me." Wu Qiuzao thought that since his sister-in-law was back, there was no need to work so hard anymore. Then he thought that maybe Cao Lishan could take the opportunity to get closer to her sister-in-law, so he nodded and closed his eyes again. Cao Lishan walked out of the house quietly. Before leaving the yard, she came to the man-made pool and looked at herself in the reflection under the moonlight. She saw that her clothes and hair were neat. This was walk towards Fan Kinjao's yard. As the saying goes, a 15-year-old moon is 16 round. The Jade Pavilion where Fan Kinjao lives is a good place to enjoy the beautiful scenery. This is the setting of a high mountain, but now it occupies an exclusive corner. Under the silvery gray of the full moon, everything in the yard seems to be coated with a layer of haziness like catkins. Bailey Fengming was sitting on a stone bench in the courtyard wearing a white robe. King Xin in her arms was making a lot of noise. Not only was Bailey Fengming not impatient at all, but she was holding King Xin high again and again, looking at King Xin. He couldn't stop giggling, and he also showed a doting smile. The clear ash of the silver moon spread all over Bailey Fengming's body, his delicate face was shining brightly, and accompanied by his smile, his sharp eyebrows were raised. Just looking at him was pleasing to the eye. Cao Lishan stood blankly at the entrance of the yard, staring at the scene with wide eyes, as if she had even forgotten to breathe. "Isn't this the etiquette of your family if you don't kneel down when you meet this prince?" Bailey Fengming's voice suddenly sounded, but his eyes were still looking at him with love in his arms. Cao Lishan was so frightened that she hurriedly came over and knelt on the ground. "Please forgive me, your highness." Bailey Fengming raised the love in his arms high again, and then asked, "But where did Ayao go?" "Sister Kinjao just left the house without saying hello." I heard my cousin said that His Royal Highness will send King Zin over later, and I have already reminded cousin Kinjao. I guess cousin Kinjao was in a hurry and didn't hear. Caolishan said this. When he arrived, he had been secretly observing Bailey Fengming's expression. Such a superior man probably doesn't like being ignored the most. But even after Caolishan waited for a long time, she couldn't see a trace of impatience on Bailey Fengming's handsome face. On the contrary, he looked at Caolishan with all his heart. His eyes were a little sleepy at first, but suddenly he became energetic. He was babbling and wanted to be hugged by Caolishan. Bailey Fengming knew that the child's nature could not be stopped by force, so he looked at Caolishan on the ground and said, "King Zin is a little sleepy too. Just take her down first." Caolishan nodded hurriedly, and when she hugged King Zin, she deliberately took a step forward. She could even smell the peculiar fragrance of His Highness the Crown Prince. But before she could take a closer look, Bailey Fengming had already distanced herself from her. The King Zin in her arms was restless because she was greedy for the smell of Caolishan, and she was extremely excited. Caolishan was really worried that His Highness would see it, so even though she was reluctant to leave, she knelt down and resigned. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 975. Chapter 975. I'm afraid I won't be able to wait until the wedding. Fan Kinjao didn't know about this incident. He went to Wu Kaiozwo's courtyard as soon as he came back. Hearing that the palace maid guarding the courtyard said that King Zin had come back to sleep a long time ago, and His Royal Highness was still there, he turned around and walked towards own yard. In the yard, Bailey Fengming's figure has long disappeared. Fan Kinjao was just curious, this person would not leave without saying hello, when suddenly the window beside him was pushed open. The lights in the house were bright, illuminating the person standing by the window as bright as jade. Fan Kinjao was a little lost in thought for a while. Bailey Fengming stood leaning against the window and smiled softly, "Are you scared?" Fan Kinjao came to his senses and shook his head, "I just have something to discuss with you." Bailey Fengming suddenly stretched out his arm outside the window and grabbed Fan Kinjao's wrist. With a tug and a flick, Fan Kinjao's body was already flying into the air. When he came to his senses, he had already been trapped by Bailey Fengming. Ming carried him into the house through the window. There were already several delicious meals on the low table of Arhat's bed. Bailey Fengming placed Fan Kinjao on the sofa, took off her shoes, and then sat on the other side. "I heard that you left in a hurry in the afternoon, so I thought that you probably didn't eat." "It just so happened that I didn't eat well at my mother's place," Bailey Fengming said and handed over the chopsticks. Fan Kinjao didn't believe that he would not be able to fill his stomach at the queen's place. He was probably worried that she would lose her appetite by eating alone. She was indeed a little hungry after going back and forth, so she took a few mouthfuls of rice before telling her about the little princess. Again. After Bailey Fengming heard this, he first raised his eyes and looked at Fan Kinjao. "What do you think?" Fan Kinjao is outspoken and of course sticks to his own opinions. Bailey Fengming nodded and said, "Your idea may be right, but those people's ideas may not be just a test. They may be intentional. They give them a blow first. It doesn't seem to be of any benefit to them, but as long as we mess up, they will always have an opportunity. That's how he is. No matter what happens, he will always ask for her opinion. He will also carefully analyze her thoughts. Even if the two people's ideas really differ, he will combine their opinions into one. Rather than forcefully instilling your ideas into her." Fan Kinjao has long known that Bailey Fengming has always been tolerant of her. Although it is something she is used to, she still feels warm in her heart. "It seems that I have underestimated them." Fan Kinjao narrowed his eyes slightly and said. "Maybe I have a villainous heart." Bailey Fengming smiled and gave her a chopstick of steamed fish. "No matter what their purpose is, the result is the same. If it affects your appetite, but it's not worth it. When Fan Kinjao came to his senses, he saw him looking at her and smiling. Knowing that he said this because he was afraid that she would not eat well, his anger was still half gone. After dinner, Fan Kinjao handed over the letter he had written in advance. I need to trouble you to ask your people to go to Qingnanzai. The sooner the better. Bailey Fengming didn't ask anything, just took the letter. Yuanyu seems to be very close to King's Inn. The Queen Mother wants King's Inn to go and walk around with Yuanyu more in the past few days. Fan Kinjao didn't think much about it. I'll send King's Inn there in person tomorrow. Bailey Fengming smiled and nodded, okay. While the two people were talking, the palace people had already packed away the leftover food. Bailey Fengming got up and left when he saw that it was getting late. Fan Kinjao originally wanted to see him off in person, but was stopped by Ye Feng. Tailiang stayed in the house. Fan Kinjao simply walked to the window, watched him walk out of the door, then watched him walk into the courtyard, and then walk towards the courtyard door. Suddenly, there was a blur in front of his eyes, and he was supposed to leave. The white shadow appeared in front of me again. I still can't bear to leave you. Bailey Fengming raised the corner of his mouth through a window, with a smile that was different from usual. Before Fan Kinjao had time to react, his long arm had already been stretched out towards her through the window. As his slender fingers wrapped around her slender waist, his soft and cool lips pressed down. Such a domineering attitude, giving her no chance to resist or dodge. The night is quiet and charming. I don't know how long it took before he let go of her mouth. She opened her eyes and looked at his face close at hand. The black eyes under her eyelashes seemed to be filled with mist. He looked at her carefully for a moment, and then his slender fingers slowly touched her eyes, covering her eyes almost forcefully. She only felt a phoenix pass by her, and then she was picked up. Fan Kinjao was stunned when he heard Bailey Fengming's voice ringing in his ears again, I'll take you to bed myself. If you continue to watch like this, I'm afraid you won't be able to wait until the wedding. Fan Kinjao. Your Majesty, please shut up. When her body touched the soft bed, the hand that was holding him gently covered her body with the quilt. His soft palm patted her body again and again through the quilt, signaling that he should return the favor. Never left. Fan Kinjao was really tired after working hard all day, and he actually fell asleep like this. When I opened my eyes the next day, it was already past midnight, and Bailey Fengming was no longer around me. Fan Kinjao got up and called the palace servants to come and wash up. He was worried that the Empress would be busy waiting there and would not even have time to eat breakfast. After changing his clothes, he took King's Inn to the Empress's palace. Queen Zhen 11 was very happy to see Qing Xian. She hugged Qing Xian and played around for a while, then looked at Fan Kinjao and said, You came so early but you haven't had breakfast yet. Fan Kinjao didn't lie, it's not too late to eat when we get back. Empress Zhen 11 smiled and said, There is no reason for you to leave hungry when you come here. It happens that I haven't eaten yet, so you should eat something with me before going back. Fan Kinjao said yes, and then walked towards the depths of the palace with the queen. He originally thought that the queen would have a meal in the inner hall, but he did not expect that the queen would take her directly to the back room. The Arhat bed in the house was covered with thick quilts, and even the steps below were carefully cushioned with pillows. It was Yuanyu who was playing with gadgets on it alone. Seeing King's Inn, her eyes sparkled with joy. Babbling, King's Inn seemed to be very happy to see Yuanyu, and she showed her teeth and claws. From her reaction, it was obvious that she and Yuanyu were getting along very happily. Empress Zhen 11 smiled and put King's Inn up, but Yuanyu stood up and walked around Qing Xian, and suddenly stretched out her hand towards Fan Kinjao. Fan Kinjao was worried that Yuanyu would fall, so he quickly reached out to catch it. Yuanyu took advantage of the situation. Lai fell into Fan Kinjao's arms, opened his mouth and kissed her with a ba sound. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 976. Chapter 976. Concubine Han Xian has become smarter. Fan Qinjiao was stunned for a moment before he realized what he was doing. It was probably that Yuanyu was thanking herself for letting King Zane come over to play with her. She didn't expect to be so grateful at such a young age. The palace people had already placed the breakfast on the round table, opposite the Arhat's bed. After Queen Zhen 11 sat down with Fan Qinjiao, she said, although the child Yuanyu can't speak yet, she is more sensitive than other children. Normally, a child over 2 years old should have spoken long ago, but Yuanyu never made a sound. During this period, Queen Zhen 11 also visited Ji Hongliao, but was told that everything was normal in Yuanyu. Fan Qinjiao said softly, maybe Princess Yuanyu didn't speak because she was too sensitive. Queen Zhen 11 was stunned. What do you mean? Fan Qinjiao met the queen's gaze and nodded gently. No matter how much the empress loves Yuanyu, Yuanyu was not born by the empress after all. The harem is a place where superiors are worshipped and those who are inferior are worshipped. Even though Yuanyu is a princess, she has such a shady life experience and is raped by the slaves in the palace. It's normal for them to be cold-shouldered in secret. The emperor doesn't care, even the queen can't make a big fuss, otherwise wouldn't it be clear that she is in opposition to the emperor? Empress Zhen 11 naturally understood such a simple truth. It was precisely because of this that she brought her to her side every once in a while after landing in Yuanyu. But she didn't expect that. Let nature take its course, Queen Zhen 11 sighed. Fan Qinjiao smiled and said, Princess Yuanyu is still young now. In a few years, she will always understand the Queen Mother's painstaking efforts. By then, Princess Yuanyu will naturally speak up. Empress Zhen 11 nodded, I hope so. Fan Qinjiao saw that the Queen was not in high spirits, so he changed the subject. After thinking about it, he told what happened to King Pinglai yesterday. My daughter-in-law saw that the little princess was really pitiful, so she took it upon herself to destroy the people in the yard. The palace maid sent some of them and asked the queen to blame them. Queen Zhengzi also heard about the illness of King Pinglai's little princess, but she didn't expect that there was such a reason hidden in it. She looked at Fan Qinjiao and said, you have done a good job, why should I blame you? I didn't expect them to be unable to sit still. I'm afraid the emperor asked the princes to practice riding and shooting today because they were instigated by those people. Fan Qinjiao was stunned for a moment, then understood. Since the 15th day when Bailey Rongs took the opportunity to cause trouble and tried to frame Bailey Fengming, but failed to drag Bailey Fengming into the water, Bailey Rongs has become more cautious. This time's riding and shooting competition is probably fake, and wanting to pry into Bailey Fengming's martial arts is real. You can fake it during a competition, but it's hard to fake it in daily practice. It seems like everything is calm over there now, but in fact they have been slowly taking action. I just don't know when they plan to test it out before they actually take action. Empress Zhen 11 snorted coldly. No one likes the feeling of waiting to die. Or maybe they keep testing, just to make us lose our composure, Fan Qinjiao said. Based on the temperament of Bailey Rongs and Yu Gaifei, I am afraid they would not have such good patience, but Tang Juwei was so secretive that it was impossible to figure out. Queen Zhen 11 thought about it and felt that this was the truth, and gradually calmed down. You are right, in fact, the game has already begun. Since they can hold on, there is no reason for us to be unable to bear it. Fan Qinjiao smiled and said, that's what the queen said. Queen Zhen 11 looked at Fan Qinjiao's obedient look, and her eyes softened a lot. As long as I am alive for one day, I will lay a brick for you and Fengming, and I will never let you go too far. Hard. Fan Kinjao looked at the Empress's kind face and thought of concubine Yu in her previous life. At that time, she was willing to go through fire and water for Bailey Rongs and did her best, but concubine Yu only wanted to take from her. Even Bailey Rongs never let go. Perhaps Bailey Rongs' selfishness was influenced by concubine Yu's ears and eyes. Only now did Fan Kinjao understand why concubine Yu had been favored for so many years, but the emperor never allowed her to take her place as the empress. Even the empress in her previous life had passed away long ago, and the emperor also pursued many titles, and there were no vacancies. Queen for many years. Compared with the queen, concubine Yu is really far behind. Even if the emperor loves concubine Yu, he still understands this truth. Fan Kinjao left the queen's place after breakfast. King Xin was so excited to play with Yu that she didn't even react at all to Fan Kinjao's departure. Fan Kinjao originally planned to talk to Wu Qiuzao when he returned. Unexpectedly, as soon as he returned to the courtyard, he heard that someone from the palace came to report that the second prince's concubine was here. Although Fan Kinjao has the longest relationship with the second princess, everyone has already arrived, so she has no reason to disappear, so she was invited in. Greetings to the crown princess. As soon as the second princess entered the door, she knelt on the ground. Fan Kinjao stretched out his hand and said, "The second prince and concubine don't need to pay such a courtesy. Get up and speak." The second princess knelt on the ground and did not move. She lowered her head and said softly, "I came today because I have a merciless invitation." Since the second princess is kneeling on the ground and doesn't want to get up, I know very well what you are thinking, so I may not agree. Fan Kinjao saw that it was not good for her not to get up and he actually forced her to pull her up. But it was too much to expect her to agree to something just by kneeling down. The second princess has always known that Fan Kinjao is extremely smart, but now she was rejected before she even opened her mouth. Her heart is still heavy, but she is naturally unwilling to leave like this. Raising her head suddenly, the second prince's concubine shed tears. Originally, this period of time has been good, and the second prince also deliberately alienated Aunt Liao, but before going to the palace, concubine Han Xian suddenly made a scene in the palace. Suicide. Although the second prince said nothing on his face, he has gotten closer to the third prince since he came to the palace. Now the second prince doesn't listen to what I say at all, and he doesn't even go to see concubine Lu Shu anymore. Fan Kinjao was somewhat surprised. Unexpectedly, concubine Han Xian knew how to use her strength to fight. Counting back to the time when concubine Han Xian pretended to take poison, it was exactly when she followed the queen to give concubine Han Xian the medicine. She originally wanted to help the master vent her anger, but she did not expect that concubine Han Xian was used to win the sympathy of the second prince. Such a clever thing is not something concubine Han Xian can do. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 977. Chapter 977. I still need to walk around and look back. The second prince's concubine suddenly moved forward, reached out and grabbed Fan Kinjao's ankle and said, "Concubine Lu Shu and I are devoted to the empress and the crown prince. The crown prince should be able to understand. But now the second prince is completely even. If concubine Han Xian dragged her away, both concubine Lu Shu and I were a little helpless. We still hope that the crown princess can help us." The second princess was also desperate, so she knelt down here. Fan Kinjao looked at the second prince and concubine who was crying bitterly, but said, "Is it not the second prince's concubine's own idea to let the second prince and concubine kneel here?" The second princess was stunned for a moment, her tearful eyes clearly showing a hint of panic. I really can't sympathize with the mood of the second princess, but I do understand a truth. If it is really caused by sincerity, even if the gold and stone are not opened in the end, it is better than hiding in the heart of luck. In the end, it is just, fetching water from a bamboo basket is all in vain, Fan Kinjao said with a smile. Without concubine Lu Shu's instruction, how could the second prince and concubine dare to come to her for help so rashly? Speaking of concubine Lu Shu, Fan Qinjiao said that she had no sympathy for her. However, Fan Qinjiao still disagreed with concubine Lu Shu. He wanted the second princess to be the crown prince, but he was unwilling to completely fall out with concubine Lu. Otherwise concubine Lu Shu could just ask the queen for help, so why would she let the second prince and concubine kneel to her? In the final analysis, concubine Lu Shu did not want to offend too much on both sides. If the second prince really stands by the crown prince without hesitation, then no matter what happens to the second prince, let alone the prince, the queen, and I will do our best to help, but no one has the right to force a person to stand where. The second princess is also a smart person, and she should understand that strong feelings are not sweet, Fan Qinjiao said word by word. The second princess was stunned and even stopped crying. She didn't expect Fan Qinjiao to speak so decisively, and for a moment she didn't know how to speak. Fan Qinjiao actually didn't hate the second princess, but it was a pity that she didn't marry the right person. Even her mother-in-law was taking advantage of her. He thought for a while and said, instead of kneeling here when you have time, it would be better for the second princess to spend more time accompany concubine Lu Shu, since concubine Han Xian understands the principle of burning the cauldron and sinking the boat, it is impossible for concubine Lu Shu not to understand. If concubine Lu Shu still wants to protect herself wisely, there is nothing anyone can do. The second princess lowered her head and said nothing, her face extremely pale. Actually, she knew that it was inappropriate for her mother-in-law to do this, but her mother-in-law never dared to take that step. The second prince's concubine just knelt there quietly, as if she had lost her soul. Fan Qinjiao did not urge her. He waited until the second prince's concubine took the initiative to stand up and leave before letting the palace attendants send her out. Fan Qinjiao didn't know whether the second prince would go to concubine Lu Shu after returning, or what kind of choice Lu Shu would make. But since concubine Yu still wanted to win over the second prince at this time, it proved that Bailey wrongs there is no one who is 100% sure that they can always control the king's heart. But what exactly is the disadvantage? Fan Qinjiao still can't think of it for a while. Still have to walk around and look back. Since everyone arrived at the palace, the emperor has not come forward. Although I don't know what method Bailey wrongs used to allow the emperor to help them delay, but fortunately there was no movement from the Taoist temple. The more this happens, the more Fan Qinjiao cannot take it lightly. The only ones who had fun and had good food during this period were probably the little ones who came to the palace this time. They were really carefree. The sound of children laughing and chatting could be heard in the palace all day long. Soon it was time for the princes to compete in riding and shooting. The night before, Lin Yi carried a large package to Fan Qinjiao's yard. After opening it, he found that there were sachets of different shapes and styles inside, all of which were new products that had not yet been released by King Nanzai. Fan Qinjiao had people give away all these sachets overnight. From Han Jingchen to Yan Hanbei, even the second prince and concubine sent one as a gift, and even those who were related to the princes and concubines, the family members, also have a share. Everyone was naturally very happy when they suddenly received something from the crown princess. Especially the sachet came from King Nanzai and was better and more exquisite than what the third princess had given away. Naturally, all the female relatives were tied to around the waist. I think that when the third princess sent the sachets, she chose some young juniors. Although this was done to win over people, after all, the young juniors were not ready to join the team, but many of their peers were still ignored. Although no one said it, they were all holding their breath in their hearts. Now that they have received the things from the crown princess, everyone of course wants to get rid of this bad breath. That night, the news of the sachet sent by the crown princess spread like wildfire. Those juniors who received the third prince's purse in advance originally thought that it would be the same things hanging on their waists. Even if the crown princess gave it to them, they would not receive it. It's not that you can't wear the gift from the third prince. But on the day of the competition, when they saw the princes and concubines and even the princesses carrying sachets that were many times more exquisite, all the juniors naturally took off the purses from their waists and quietly hidden back inside the sleeve. Originally, the status of the person delivering the things was not comparable, but now even the sachet is a loser. If I hang the purse on my body again, wouldn't it be obvious that I am inferior to others? It was Guan Panner who was sitting in the stands and almost died of anger on the spot. The sun on his head made his face darker. The eighth prince's concubine was the first to arrive. Sitting aside and watching the third prince's concubine, whose face was as dark as coal, she was snickering. Then she saw Fan Qinjiao, Han Jingchen, and Yan Hanbei coming over. "Princess," the eighth prince stood up first and said. Fan Qinjiao walked over with a smile, "You're quite early. Today is the day for the princes to compete. Although it is just for fun, but I heard that the emperor is coming too, so everyone rushes in early and does not dare to be late," the eighth prince said with a smile. Fan Qinjiao knew the news that the emperor would come yesterday, so he was not surprised now. Even if the emperor is not in the mood to deal with other matters, after all, he has not shown up at the palace for so long. It would be too much to not even watch the competition between his sons. Faint and incompetent but unwilling to admit it, this is their emperor. As soon as everyone sat down, Guan Panner couldn't help but said, "I really didn't realize that the crown princess has a hobby of imitating others." Fan Qinjiao was amused when he heard this. What does the third prince's concubine mean by this? Why does the crown princess have to pretend to be stupid? What I gave a few days ago, the crown princess imitated in the blink of an eye. Now the evidence is everywhere. Does the crown princess still want to quibble? Guan Panner stared at Fan Qinjiao's face and asked. "I want to see what else she has to say this time." End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 978. Chapter 978. The Queen shows affection. I really don't understand what the third prince concubine said. Why can't the third prince concubine give it to me? If he does the same thing, it would be imitating others. Then when others eat and drink water, the third prince concubine will be treated as a gift. What, do you want to stay hungry or stay thirsty? Fan Qinjiao asked with a smile. Guan Panner shivered angrily, "You are obviously using strong words to make excuses." Fan Qinjiao's smile became even more beautiful, "It's just some gadgets. Anyway, King Nanzai has a lot of them. If the third prince likes to give them away, I can buy some more." Guan Panner gritted her teeth and said, "Princess, there is no need to scare me. I can still afford some small things." Fan Qinjiao said with a smile, "The third prince and concubine are so supportive of my sister's business. It's not too late for me to thank the third prince and concubine." Guan Panner. What's the meaning? The third princess doesn't know, but the head of King Nanzai is the princess sister, Han Jingchen reminded. Hearing this, Guan Panner's face turned even uglier. It didn't matter whether she really wanted to buy it or not. Seeing that Guan Panner stopped talking, Fan Qinjiao turned his eyes to one side and looked at the surrounding scenery with the others. Today's cavalry and shooting event was held in an open space in the palace. The places where the masters sat were all temporarily set up. There was one place for the princes and concubines, another place for the ministers, and another place for the other female family members. They were clearly divided. Not long after, the emperor arrived at the open space accompanied by the queen and his concubines. While everyone knelt down to pay their respects, the emperor and the queen sat on the main seat, while concubine Yu sat on the other side slightly behind, and the other concubines were placed on both sides. "Sit down." Emperor Yongchang waved his hand and motioned for everyone to get up. Fan Qinjiao followed everyone back to his seat and looked at the emperor in the distance. Because the distance was too far, he could not clearly see the changes in the emperor's face, but the tired look on the emperor's body was difficult to hide. On the host's side, concubine Han Xian's voice never stopped since she sat down. "Your Majesty, for this competition, the second prince has been practicing day and night. He just doesn't want to disappoint the emperor." Emperor Yongchang was not very interested. He even frowned slightly and felt it was a bit noisy. Upon seeing this, concubine Yu handed over a cup of tea from behind and said, "Your Majesty, please take a sip of tea to quench your thirst." Emperor Yongchang took the teacup and hummed indistinguishably. How could concubine Han Xian not know that concubine Yu was secretly mocking her for being too talkative? Even though she was still a little unwilling to do so, she could only keep her mouth shut. Concubine Lu Shu looked at concubine Han Xian trying hard to please the emperor, and subconsciously looked in the direction of the queen. She saw the queen looking at the empty space with a calm expression, as if she hadn't heard anything. She couldn't tell whether it was disappointment or confusion. Eyes. Of course Empress Zhen 11 was aware of concubine Lu Shu's gaze, but so what? Even a fool like concubine Han Xian knew that she had to work hard to please concubine Diu if she wanted her blessing, but concubine Lu Shu wanted to pretend to be a good person and get benefits at the same time. How could she get so many benefits prepared for her? Bai Tu looked at the emperor's forlorn expression, then walked over and whispered, "Your Majesty, it's time to begin." Emperor Yongchang waved his hand weakly and said in a gentle voice, "Let's get started." As the horn blew on the side of the clearing, King Pinglai pushed the wooden cart to the clearing. Even if he was not riding on horseback, King Pinglai was disabled after all. No one would really take this as an excuse. A difficult excuse. In the end, 10 arrows and 5 crowds were quite satisfactory. Reward. Emperor Yongchang waved his hand meaningfully. King Pinglai quickly knelt down to thank him. "My son, I thank my father for the reward." After King Pinglai went down, the prince walked into the open space. Seeing this, other people around him stared at it with wide eyes. After all, the prince has been in the limelight recently. Since many ministers have stood in line, naturally I hope His Royal Highness can perform well. Fan Qinjiao looked at the excitement of the ministers and felt funny in his heart, fearing that he would disappoint them. Sure enough, out of 10 arrows shot by a 100-mile phoenix, only 3 were missed. This result is not a good result for the prince who is blessed by nature. Concubine Yu said unhurriedly, "I heard that His Highness the Crown Prince has been very valued by the Emperor recently, so I thought that he would live up to the expectations and put in some effort, but I didn't expect that it would be so unsatisfactory." When Queen Zhen 11 heard this, she glanced at concubine Yu from the corner of her eye and said, "Practice martial arts is a small matter. The prince has been in poor health since he was a child. At the beginning, I also said that I should strengthen my martial arts skills, and maybe it can strengthen the prince's health to keep fit. I didn't expect that the emperor cared too much for the prince and simply exempted him from martial arts." After hearing this, Emperor Yongchang's thoughts wandered a little far. I still remember that the prince's health was not very good when he was a child, and the queen did tell him that she wanted the prince to practice martial arts diligently to improve his body. But what was his answer at the time? Oh, he thought about it? At that time, he was more partial to the third prince than he is now. Then he thought about concubine Yu saying that the newly born 7th prince had caught a weapon by drawing lots, so he simply used it to let the prince take care of himself and cut off the prince's ability to practice martial arts. Idea. Since the queen is not favored anyway, it doesn't matter if the prince is really abandoned. It was not his wish to establish the prince in the first place, but it was just to block the mouth of Yu in the court. But now that he heard what the queen said, Emperor Yongchang could only echo, the prince's body was indeed not suitable for martial arts practice at that time. It's so old that I didn't expect the queen to be able to remember it. After hearing this, Queen Zhen 11 wanted to reach out and strangle this old scumbag to death. But in front of a concubine, especially concubine Yu, Queen Zhen 11 not only couldn't be angry, but also had to show a grateful expression. It's all my fault, I didn't give the prince a good body, which made the emperor worried. Although Emperor Yongchang could not be said to have any guilty conscience, the prince had indeed behaved well during this period and had been working hard to help him with things. After thinking about it, he still held the queen's hand. Concubine Yu's face changed and she gritted her teeth in anger. Who in the harem didn't know that the emperor didn't care about the life or death of the prince at all, so he didn't care whether the prince practiced martial arts. The result was such a secret that everyone knew, but the queen took advantage of it to show off her affection. When everyone was talking, the second prince had already finished the competition. Seeing that the emperor didn't even look at him, concubine Han Xian felt very uncomfortable, but she couldn't show it. Shortly afterwards, Bailey Rongs came to the open space. Wearing a riding and shooting outfit, carrying a bow and arrow on his back, and holding a horse rope in his hand, he shocked the young ladies around him as soon as he came on stage from Bailey Rongs. Especially when Bailey Rongs hit every shot, the stands became excited. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 979. Chapter 979, How about giving you a surprise? Although Bailey Rongs' face is slightly inferior to that of the prince, with the blessing of riding and shooting, how can he not make the ladies present excited? Guan Pan'er was dumbfounded. She didn't expect the third prince to be so high-spirited. Although concubine Yu knew her son could win for a long time, when she saw it, she was still excited and praised her son over and over again for how awesome he was. Unexpectedly, Emperor Yongchang did not reward Bailey Rongs highly. Of course Fan Qinjiao couldn't see the disappointment in concubine Yu's eyes, but the emperor deliberately did not reward Bailey Rongs heavily for her good performance. Perhaps he was giving Bailey Rongs a reminder and urging Bailey Rongs to refine the elixir as soon as possible. If this happens, Bailey Rongs will probably take action soon. In about half an hour, the princes had finished their riding and shooting competition. What everyone didn't expect was that the person ranked last was not the prince, but the sixth prince. Even though Han Jingchen didn't need to look back, she could still imagine the eyes of the people around her looking at her. How could it be that she cheered the sixth prince up last night, and this was how she repaid her? The sixth prince, who was the last to mention 11, after he and the other princes sent his father and the concubines away, he stood straight on the spot, not daring to look at his wife's side. Open your face. As soon as the emperor left, other people in the stands also stood up. Fan Qinjiao, Han Jingchen, and others were about to leave when they saw Princess Yunyu walking over with a smile on her face. Today the third prince came out on top. The third prince's concubine cannot be so stingy. She is the one who wants to make things happen. Princess Yunyu looked at Guan Pan'er and said with a smile. Of course, Guan Pan'er would not refuse, and quickly agreed. Princess Yunyu said, yes, I will have someone prepare it right now. Just at this time, a group of princes also came over. They heard that the third prince's concubine wanted to host something. Although they were not very interested, they couldn't refuse without giving the third prince face. Bailey Rongs looked at Bailey Fengming and said, the prince must also come together. Bailey Fengming has never liked this kind of gathering, but now he doesn't have to feel aggrieved. He said softly, I won't go. Bailey Rongs had no intention of letting Bailey Fengming go. He smiled and said, all the 6 emperor brothers are coming, how can we miss the prince? Although this was not said clearly, everyone understood that the 6th prince was at the bottom of the queue this time. He even went to the last place, but the prince did not go. Isn't it obvious that he could not afford to lose? When Fan Qinjiao saw several princes coming over, he calmly stood up and walked to Bailey Fengming's side and said, the prince has promised me a long time ago that he will take me out for a walk after the competition is over, but I don't want to. I think the prince didn't get a good ranking, so he still plans to refuse my appointment." As soon as these words came out, Bailey Wrongs had no choice but to let him go no matter how much he wanted to. Otherwise, wouldn't he become a despicable person who destroys other people's feelings? In particular, Bailey Wrongs knew very well that his father valued the Hua family's marriage very much, and even planned to use the prince to weigh the Hua family. Not to mention him, not even Yunya could say anything more. With almost everyone watching, Bailey Fengming took Fan Qinjiao away in a grand manner, leaving the others standing there with big eyes wide open. Fan Qinjiao originally planned to leave with Bailey Fengming first and make some plans for the rest, but he didn't expect that Bailey Fengming would actually take her on the carriage traveling out of the palace. Sitting on the carriage, Fan Qinjiao asked doubtfully, "Where are we going?" Bailey Fengming smiled and asked, "How about a surprise for you?" Fan Qinjiao didn't expect Bailey Fengming to start a lawsuit, but when she saw that the carriages had already left the palace, she didn't say much. With Bailey Wrong's caution, he was afraid that someone would keep an eye on her and Bailey Fengming during the party, so he might as well take the opportunity to go out for a walk and avoid being stared at. The carriage drove all the way into the town, but it did not stop in the town. Instead, it kept driving forward. Finally, it was almost out of the palace, and then it slowly stopped. Fan Qinjiao followed Bailey Fengming out of the carriage and discovered that this was an abandoned barren mountain. Walking up, he could vaguely see a pavilion halfway up the mountain. At this time, there seemed to be a figure shaking in the pavilion. Bailey Fengming let go of the hand he had been holding and said softly, "Go and have a look. He has been waiting for you for a long time." Fan Qinjiao frowned in confusion, looked in the direction of the pavilion again, then picked up her skirt and continued walking up the mountain. As she got closer to the pavilion, the figure in the pavilion became more and more, it became clear. Even though it was just a back view, the familiar feeling made Fan Qinjiao's chest tremble inexplicably. The people in the pavilion seemed to hear the footsteps, stood up and turned around. When they saw Fan Qinjiao outside, they were also stunned, and then they smiled and said, "Little Qinjiao." Fan Qinjiao's tears flashed across his face in an instant. He choked for a while before saying in a trembling voice, "Fourth uncle." Huao's eyes were red with excitement as well, and he kept nodding his head, "Don't cry, why are you crying? Come here and let uncle see, but you have grown into a big girl." Fan Qinjiao sniffed, rushed into the pavilion, and threw himself into the arms of his fourth uncle. A few years apart, but it's like heaven and earth are separated forever. Huao's tears also rolled down his eyes silently. He hugged his niece in his arms, feeling infinitely sad but also extremely happy. Bailey Fengming has been standing outside the pavilion, just watching quietly without disturbing. I don't know how much time passed before Huao patted Fan Qinjiao on the shoulder and said, "If you continue to cry, your other uncles will probably beat me into a pig's head." He came to see Xiao Qinjiao with everyone's thoughts on him, but when he returned, he told them and just cried without saying a word. Is it normal? Fan Qinjiao also knew that his fourth uncle would never show up for no reason. He endured the sadness of meeting, took a step back, looked at his uncle and said, "Is fourth uncle here because of the Taoist temple?" "Our little Qinjiao is indeed very smart." Huao nodded and looked at His Highness the Crown Prince outside, "But I am not in a hurry to see you." His Highness the Crown Prince said that today is a good time to meet. Bailey Fengming walked in from the outside, stood beside Fan Qinjiao and said, "Today's competition has wasted a lot of energy on my father's part. I'm afraid he will have to take a nap after returning. Princess Yunyu's flamboyant temperament will brother three emperors will definitely celebrate after winning the first place, which can be considered as holding off brother three emperors for the time being." Fan Qinjiao looked at Bailey Fengming in surprise. She knew that Bailey Fengming could never win in this competition, so she didn't feel that it was embarrassing to lose. But she didn't expect that Bailey Fengming had planned it from the beginning. Alright. If Bailey Rongs knew that the final result of this competition was like this, he would be so angry that he would vomit blood on the spot. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 980. Chapter 980 A Brief Reunion. Hua has always known that the prince loves his niece. Otherwise, why would he take the risk to find the Hua family when there are thousands of people who can develop? But now that I have seen it with my own eyes, I can't help but be happy for little Fan Kinjao. Your Highness, please sit down and talk. Bailey Fengming was not polite, but when he sat down, he did not forget to pull Fan Kinjao to sit beside him, and then he said, back then, I discovered many remains in the Taoist temple. The elixirs had fallen, so Ayao and I thought that even if Brother Sanhuang didn't find any new elixirs, there must still be a few elixirs in hand, so I needed someone to get the elixirs at a specific time. Steal it out. Hua frowned. What does His Highness want those pills for? Fan Kinjao said, if you want the Emperor to really doubt that those elixirs can really lead to immortality, you must let the Emperor see something with his own eyes. Hua was startled, so you plan to give the stolen elixir to others? Bailey Fengming shook his head, there is no need to let others take it, but the elixir must be stolen, and after the fourth major general of the Hua family gets it, the people in the Taoist temple must know that the elixir has been stolen. Hua nodded and said, since you are just looking for someone who is good at Qinggong, why would His Highness take the risk to find me? The Hua family man has been practicing martial arts since he was a child, but everyone is good at different things. Although he is best at Qing Kung Fu, as long as he wants to, there is no place he can't enter, but few people go to communicate with them. Xian and Lin Yi's Qinggong are not too bad. When Bailey Fengming heard this, Shi Shiren smiled and said, Qinggong does not require the fourth major general of the Hua family, but Ayao's fourth uncle can only be the fourth major general of the Hua family. Fan Kinjao was stunned, you really don't have to. It just so happens that my father is not in good spirits, and we also need someone who is good at light skills. We only met temporarily, so why do we have so many worries? Bailey Fengming smiled and shook Fan Kinjao's hand. Fan Kinjao didn't know his intentions, so he nodded movedly. Hua. It's almost done. But seeing that His Royal Highness the Crown Prince really loves his niece, Hua is really happy. Hearing that this time, even his younger sister's little daughter is here too, but it's a pity that he can't take a look at it, but Hua doesn't have it either. I feel disappointed, but we can finally reunite one day. Looking at his fourth uncle, Fan Kinjao knew that his fourth uncle was thinking about him, so he simply talked about some trivial things about his daily life. Seeing his fourth uncle smiling happily, Fan Kinjao just wished that time could pass slower. Bailey Fengming could obviously see Fan Kinjao's reluctance, and had been sitting by him all the time. Finally, as the sky got dark, Hua felt that it shouldn't be delayed any longer, so Fan Kinjao followed Bailey. Fengming reluctantly left. Tears once again dimmed the eyes, but neither Hua nor Fan Kinjao let the tears fall again. Fan Kinjao could see the forbearance of his fourth uncle. Even the fists behind his back were clenched so tightly that they turned white. See you again. Bailey Fengming put his arm around Fan Kinjao's shoulders and said. Yeah. Fan Kinjao nodded and followed Bailey Fengming into the carriage. Bailey Fengming helped Fan Kinjao get into the carriage and saw that she was still looking out the window intentionally or unintentionally. He waited until she completely retracted her gaze before he ordered, let's go. As the carriage gradually left the barren mountains behind, Fan Kinjao regained his composure after the pain and sadness in his eyes. Is the banquet at the palace already dispersed? Fan Kinjao asked softly. Since it is separation, what is the use of not letting go? It would be better to hide everything in your heart. In this battle, everyone is moving forward with a heavy burden, and she has no right to be sad. Since Brother Three Emperors is hosting a banquet, he will naturally bring all the little ones in the palace to the banquet. Only in this way can he show his kindness and fraternity. Bailey Fengming wiped the corners of her red eyes, and said, he rested her head on his shoulder. Since the little ones are present, the banquet will not end so quickly. Bailey Fengming was right, the palace was bustling at this time. All juniors with some background were invited to the third prince's courtyard. Dozens of people were making a lot of noise, and even talking had to be shouted. Guanpanner didn't have much patience with children, so she couldn't sit with them in the same place, so she asked the palace people to separate the front hall with a screen in advance. Little ones. After all, this banquet was held in the courtyard of the third prince, and most of the people present were members of the royal family. Naturally, someone with a status like Wu Qiuzhao was not qualified to participate, and could only leave the children to the care of the palace officials. As everyone sat down, the chattering began again. After 3 drinks, the topics naturally became looser. Many of the people present were members of the Yu family, and they naturally wanted to please the third prince. I didn't know who was the first to speak. I didn't expect His Highness the Crown Prince to not attend such a gathering. This is because I don't take the third prince seriously, or simply don't think highly of all of us. King Pinglai frowned and said, you can't say that. After all, the prince agreed to the princess in advance. Although the relationship between the two is not that particular, they have never been married. If the prince breaks the promise to the princess now, it will be rumored in the future. It's also a shame for the royal family to go out. Since the second prince has made his position clear, he naturally wants to curry favor with the third prince at this time, so what, if the prince really cares about us brothers, he should persuade the prince to come together. The sixth prince didn't want to speak at first, but out of the corner of his eye he saw his wife staring at him for a moment. The sixth prince shivered, and after thinking about it, he finally said, second, what the second prince said is very serious. Okay, besides, it's not the behavior of a gentleman to gossip behind our backs, so let's have a drink. At this time, Bailey Rongs pretended to be generous and said, sixth brother Huang is right. There are good wines and good food today, so why talk about the ones that are not available? When the Yu family saw that the third prince had spoken, they naturally couldn't say anything more, but these words reached the little guy through the screen. The people of the Hua family are arrogant and unreasonable, and there are no rules to talk about. If it weren't for the emperor's mercy, the Hua family would not even be qualified to carry shoes for the royal family. The person who spoke was none other than Yu Xing, the son who followed MRSU's family to Hua's house. There were many people present, including other children from the minister's family who were good friends with the third prince. When they heard Yu Xing's words, they also started laughing. I heard that the princess's beauty may have confused His Highness because of her face. No matter how good looking you are, it doesn't matter, it's not about being attached to a man. To put it bluntly, it's just a worthless piece of clothing. These kids from rich families often gather together to talk nonsense, and since they are all young, they have no boundaries when it comes to talking. Hearing this, Brother Ren looked at Yu Xing and said, you can't say that about my little aunt. End of this chapter.